Depth of field is a term used in photography that you'll likely be familiar with. It refers to how narrow or wide the aperture of your lens is, and therefore how much of the scene is rendered in sharp focus. A wide aperture of say f1.8 is usually preferred for portraits, as it gives you a shallow depth of field and makes it possible to blur the background easily. But for landscapes you're more likely to want a narrow aperture of say f11 or f16 to give you a much larger zone of sharp focus, so the viewer can see everything clearly from the foreground to the background. However, the laws of physics mean that even with a narrow aperture, some of your shot is going to be out of focus. So in this video I'm going to show you how to shoot a series of images focusing on each part of the landscape and then stitching them together in Photoshop to create a focus stacked image, where the picture is totally sharp from the front all the way to the back. To try your hand at focus stacking, you'll need a tripod to give you consistent framing between each shot. A creative Canon DSLR or CSC with creative modes such as aperture priority and manual mode, and you'll also need a lens. A kit lens like an 18 to 55 or 24 to 70mm is going to work great. Many photographers employ focus stacking when shooting with macro lenses too, because depth of field can be very limited here. But it's beneficial for the landscape scene we're shooting here too. With your lens attached to your Canon camera, you need to set it to its manual or MF focusing mode, so you can dial in the focus manually. You'll also want to put your camera on a tripod and switch off any image stabilization, as these systems can actually add more blur to your pictures when they're completely locked off. When you've framed up on your scene using a tripod and achieved the composition you like, it's time to dial in the settings. Start by going into your camera's aperture priority or AV mode. Then dial in an aperture of f11 for a decent depth of field, so you get a good portion of the frame in sharp focus to begin with. Then, using the evaluative metering mode, tweak the ISO until you get a shutter speed of about 1/200th of a second or faster. Lastly, switch over to your camera's manual or M mode and enter the exact same settings that you had in aperture priority. This will ensure that you get consistent exposures that won't change between frames, making it easier to merge them together later on. Now go into your Canon camera's quick menu and set the drive mode to 2-second self timer, so that when you press the shutter button, the movement from your finger pressing the shutter isn't recorded as camera shake. Now twist the focus ring of your lens so the nearest part of the scene is in sharp focus, and press the shutter button to take the first shot. Next, rotate the zoom ring slightly to get the next part of the frame in sharp focus and take another picture. Repeat this until you have enough photos across the frame to have complete sharpness. This was a total of 8 images for our windmill scene here. Be careful not to inadvertently knock your camera or tripod between shots, as you need the composition of each one to be exactly the same. Okay, so with all the pictures taken, it's time to merge the various different focal points together in Photoshop to get a totally sharp shot. So I've opened all of the pictures up here into Adobe Bridge. So I'm just going to click on the first one and then hold the Shift key and click on the last one to make sure that they're all selected. Then I'm going to head up to Tools and down to Photoshop and load files into Photoshop Layers. After a few moments you'll see that all of those pictures have been stacked into the Photoshop layers, so now I'm just going to head over to the Layers panel, click on the top layer, hold the Shift key again and click on the bottom layer. And now I'm going to go over to Edit and Auto Align Layers. Hit OK to the box that appears. There we go, so that's aligned all of the layers, and that should take care of any alignment issues that might have happened from between shots. And you'll see around the edges we've got this weird effect here, so I'm just going to grab the crop tool and crop that out as well. Just drag the crop in to remove those weird edges. And just double click on the crop to apply that. Now we've still got all of those layers selected, so we'll head up to Edit again, and this time click on Auto Blend Layers. And then in the box that appears we want to make sure that we've got Stack Images selected, and then we can have these two options down here ticked as well, so we'll just hit OK. And then after a few moments Photoshop will have taken each of the sharp bits of each of those shots and you'll be left with a completely sharp picture. So now you know how to focus stack your images with your camera and Photoshop. Be sure to employ this powerful technique the next time you're out shooting your landscapes.